I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me here to present to all of you. What you see there is my complicated name. Please feel free to call me Venkat. My intent, as I stand in front of you today, is to ensure that the hour that we spend is usefully spent. What a wonderful opportunity to have 500 salespeople right in front. And let's go ahead and ensure that this hour that we spend, you go back with tremendous amount of value. As we look back on how we spend this 1 hour, it is not about me and my smartness. It is all going to be about you and your greatness. What you're going to go ahead and take away, you are my customers. I'm going to ensure that you go back with tremendous amount of value. Before we even get started, I want to start off with a quote from Confucius. He said, "When I hear, I forget. When I see, I remember. And when I do, I understand." My request to each one of you, if you have a notepad and a pen, please take notes. There is a nerve that runs from here that connects to all of our 5 senses, and you would go ahead and take in all of the richness of what we covered today. I'm going to cover a lot of ground, and as we go through this, given your background and expertise, you would make multiple connections in your own mind. Those are your insights. Please don't let them go away. Please record them for your own benefit. Now, let me go ahead and talk a little bit about how I have seen sales evolve. I've been in sales, much like every one of you, for the past 2 decades, if not more. So when I started off in sales more than 20 years back, customers bought from me because they like me. They said, "Venkat, nice person, he's smiling, I like him. Let me throw some business to him." That was 20 years back. 10 years back, customers said, "Look, I still like Venkat, but you know what? The reason that I go ahead and buy from him is because I trust him." And remember, trust is a factor of 3 C's. You can note it down if you want. The 3 C's of trust. The first C of trust is character. Do I resonate with my customer on the values that we hold dear? Do we resonate at the values level? That's the first thing about character. Do we stand for what we want to achieve together? Is that foundation strong? The second C of trust is competency. It is just not about the connection, it's about the intellectual horsepower that you go ahead and bring into the customer conversation. The third C of trust is where most of us fail, as individuals, as teams, as organizations. It's called consistency. The ability to make, meet, exceed, and consistently meet those commitments. So about 10 years back, customers said, "Look, Venkat, I trust you." And when they said trust, it was about character, competency, and consistency. Now, when I go and meet customers, if they only like and trust me, that gets me a cup of coffee and a couple of biscuits. Right? If they want more, I better add value to the customer. And remember, value is a belief. Value is not your 200-page proposal with your complex spreadsheet. Value is what the customer acknowledges as what you have gone ahead and delivered. So today, customers go ahead and say, please add value. That's the only reason I will buy from you. But remember, it is just not value that will go ahead and take us forward. Going forward, customers are saying, please provide me with proactive insight. Tell me something I don't know, and tell me something about the impact of what I don't know in my business terms. That's exactly what people are asking for. So when there was a question at that end where you were asking about customers doing 60 to 70% of their research before getting to speaking to a salesperson, if you have an opportunity, read the book called The Challenger Sale. It's called Challenger Sale by Matt Dixon. It talks about how customers have done their own research, and they are primarily looking out for salespeople who tell them something that they do not know. If you come and tell me something that I know, I will treat you like a vendor. And do you know where vendors go to? Vendors get relegated to what I call vendor jail. That's called procurement. That's called purchasing, where at the end of every quarter, they apply the squeeze on you. And we are too happy going at the end of every quarter genuflecting. We should not. We should go ahead and develop that ability, the intellectual horsepower, to go ahead and build insights. Next element, when we look at what customers are expecting, is for us to be a catalyst for their success. If you have studied chemistry at any point in time, you would understand that a catalyst is something that accelerates a reaction. How does a little bit of John helps the customer to go ahead and accelerate their success? That's what you should be. How does a little bit of you in the customer equation accelerate their success? If you look at this model, there are two more that I have consciously left out. And let me tell you about it. Below like is something called tolerate. I like your product, I tolerate you. And even below tolerate is hate. You dare do an audit on me? I hate you guys. All right? So please be aware as you take a look at this about where you stand. In fact, as I engage with INFOR, I can sense a number of you in the like and trust. We are blessed that our customers like and trust us, but that's not what's going to help us in the future. We need to move towards trust and value, and if you're really world-class, we need to go ahead and move from value to insight. And that is the reason that I'm here. I believe that each one of us has this potential to be world-class. And let's spend the rest of the time talking about what really is world-class. Let me go ahead and give you some food for thought. If selling has changed more in the last 10 years than the last 100, how have you, your team, changed? And remember those words, to survive and thrive. If you always did what you have done over the last decade, perhaps you're irrelevant now. Please go ahead and ensure that you are investing now to secure the future. Let me ask you a question. How many of you spend between 2 to 4 hours every week sharpening your saw? Good. Good. If you are not sharpening your own saw, you become irrelevant. If you are irrelevant, you become commoditized. So please spend 2 to 4 hours building up the skills, building up all the practices that would make you even more successful. Let me go ahead and ask you one more question. How many of you want to become world-class at what you do? Beautiful. I love this group. I love this group. So what I'm going to do is to go ahead and share with you the different quotients that would build world-class salespeople. As you listen to me, take down notes, I will point you to different resources. Let's make this rich. So if you look at the quotients, I'm going to take you through the emotional, communication, intelligence, etc. Let me walk you through each one of them. The first element about emotional quotient comes from the fact that people buy from people. So let's say John is my customer, and I have to go ahead and meet up with him. I have to ensure that we are able to establish rapport within the first couple of minutes. Now, how do you establish rapport in the first couple of minutes? It's extremely important. What I have discovered over the past 2 decades, the fastest way to go ahead and build rapport is when you fill your heart with the need to make the other person successful. Let me also tell you something about neuroscience. There is so much about improvement on neuroscience now. Let's say I'm looking at Maria. When I look at her, the signals from her come to the base of my brain, which is called the amygdala. The amygdala is also called the survival brain. It's also called the reptilian brain. It does only 3 things. When I look at Maria, it says fight, flight, or freeze. That's it. Correct? Now, when I look at her, when I trust her, is when the signals from the back of the brain goes to the frontal brain, which is called the prefrontal cortex, or the new brain, which is where processing happens. So what really happens when I look at Maria is there is a trust meter behind. The trust meter is either red, yellow, or green. The only way Maria can get through to me is when my trust meter goes to green. Only then I'm actually listening to what she's saying. Have you all been in meetings where all of you are talking, but you know nothing substantial will happen at the end of that meeting? Have you been in those kind of meetings? We all have been. That is the absence of trust. That is where your trust meter is either red or yellow. They still haven't trusted you, which is why they are not hearing what you're saying. The only way that you can get to green very early is when you fill your heart with the need to make your customer successful. That's the truest way, because if you fill your heart with the need to make your customer successful, it will shine through your eyes. If I went to my customer and said, I'm going to land her this quarter, somehow I'll get this deal out this quarter, do you think your customer will feel it? They will. So you got to be careful how you raise your awareness on how people decide and go ahead and go through the heart to the head. The second element that you need to remember is communication quotient. And communication quotient is all about articulation. The first thing about communication is no guessing. Oftentimes, people use words that they have a definition for. In fact, let me go ahead and give you a quote. Definitions are found in dictionaries. Meaning is found in people. So when they go ahead and say, look, I want to go ahead and move to the cloud, please go ahead and check with them. What does that mean in the context of what they want to achieve? Help me understand. When you say the cloud, what does that mean in the context of what you want to achieve in the organization? Never guess. The second element about communication is what I call the three: simplicity, brevity, and clarity. Simplicity is about the quality of words that we use that convey meaning. Brevity is the poverty of words that's rich in meaning. Use as few words as possible to convey as much as you can. The last element is clarity. It's not about clarity in your head, it's about clarity in the customer's mind. And as human beings communicate, the element that we need to understand is the fact that each one of us is different. And when we look at behavioral styles, you need to be aware of how each person is different. So when we look at people, they can either be task-oriented or relationship-oriented. They can either be tellers or they could be asking questions. This comes from a great book, which is called People Styles at Work. What you should look at is your own assessment of your behavioral style. And my request of you would be to go ahead and assess the behavioral style of your most important contacts within your customer. And then you could go ahead and find out how you need to flex to the style of your customer. Let me give you an example. Let's say one of you is part of my team. I am a driver. And let's say she is an expressive. And let's say she has missed her forecast, and I go ahead and ask her, why did you miss your forecast? And she's an expressive. She goes ahead and says, oh, let me tell you all about my customer, how I went and met them, and everything else. Please remember that every person is different. It's our responsibility to flex to the customer. In fact, if you're a sales manager or a sales executive, we exist to serve our teams. And therefore, we need to flex to how our team members are. So not every person is created equal. If you have an opportunity, read that book, People Styles at Work. After you have identified people's styles, the next element that is important in communication is influencing. In fact, what I have depicted here is what I have pulled out from the Bible of Influence, which is called Robert Cialdini's book on influence. He talks about 6 different facets of influence, and each one of us need to be aware of how we can influence people. Let me give you an example on one of them. The second element of influence is called reciprocity. And let me give you an example of how reciprocity works even at the national level. In the 1950s, there was a famine in Ethiopia. There is still famine here, there, right? There was a famine in Ethiopia. And Mexico sent a lot of foodstuff across to Ethiopia. In the 1990s, there was floods in Mexico. Ethiopia sent $50,000 as flood relief. So remember, when you do good to others, it will always come back. Not necessarily immediately, but it will always come back. That's how human beings are made. It's called reciprocity. In fact, one of the hats that I wear is that of an executive coach. I coach CXOs in Fortune 500 companies, and my encouragement to them is to go ahead and build positive emotional bank accounts in other people. When you build those emotional bank accounts, that will pay you back as well. Now, let's say we have gone ahead and used emotional quotient to go ahead and connect with people. And I'm now with the customer. Both of us like each other. We are smiling at each other. But something needs to happen, right? You can't be just smiling at each other. Something intellectual needs to happen in the customer meeting, which is where intelligence quotient comes in. Intelligence quotient is all about business acumen. And let me tell you what I mean by business acumen. In my job, I have the opportunity to review a number of account plans. And when the account executive talks to me about account plans, I normally time how much time they take to go from the customer to their company and the product. Oftentimes, it's 90 seconds. Let me tell you about Wells Fargo, and then let me tell you about our licensing. Right? So business acumen is about understanding your customer in great detail. What are their strategies for them to be successful? How do they make money? What is their value proposition to their customers? How do they compete in their markets? Those are all the elements that you need to know as you engage with your customers. A couple of resources that you could use to build your own business acumen. One book that you could read is called What the CEO Wants You to Know. It's a wonderful book. What the CEO Wants You to Know. And the other one that you could look at is Seeing the Big Picture. It's about helicoptering our thinking to go ahead and look at the broader aspect of how the customer runs their business. So it's called Seeing the Big Picture. The next element about intelligence quotient is the ability to go ahead and ask powerful questions. And let me tell you why this is important. Let's say Ed has been promoted today to chairman of Wells Fargo. I don't know why I'm saying Wells Fargo every time. Let's go ahead and say Royal Bank of Scotland. Okay? Now, if I were to meet him, remember, every conversation is a mutual flow of value. The value that Ed can provide to me is the information about his company and their initiatives. Now, there is no way that I will know more about Ed and his company than Ed himself. So the only way I can add value is by asking questions that itself is value to him. Think about it. Those are those questions that you go ahead and ask where the customer goes back and says, wow, I never thought of that. Correct? So please go ahead and build some muscle on asking powerful questions. Asking powerful questions. There's a book on power questions if you want, right? Read those books. Improve your ability to ask powerful questions. The third element is what I call dance of insight. when you go ahead and spend time with decision makers, you need to be having a conversation which by itself is like a dance. And the dance is providing value both ways. How am I adding insight to the customer? How are they adding insight to us? In fact, one of the best ways I have found to go ahead and have this dance of insight is whiteboarding. To go ahead and whiteboard your discussion, that makes a tremendous difference to your customers. And of course, I told you, if we do all of these, that increases the level of competency so that we are able to build trust. Trust is character, competency, and consistency. Now that we have gone ahead and met the customer, we are engaging in a conversation. Remember, when the economy goes down, the decision-making goes up. Let me say that again. When the economy goes down, the decision-making goes up, which means we need to maximize the time that we spend with our customers. Previously, executives who used to give us 1 hour for a meeting, they give you 20 minutes now. Do you see that? You get 15 to 20 minutes with executives. How you maximize the time is what sets you apart. And for you to maximize the time, you need to follow a sales methodology. I've just gone ahead and done something called INFOR here, just illustrative, but it tells you how you need to initiate, how you need to navigate, how you need to formulate, how you need to optimize, and regenerate opportunities across with your customers. And remember, it's that methodology that maximizes the time that you spend with your customers. And sales process that we go ahead and use, whether we use it with customers or whether we use it internally, should be a bi-directional value add. I have seen too many sales managers who go ahead and beat up salespeople to use the CRM, but add no value on top of it. Remember, if I am requesting you to use the CRM, it's my responsibility as the leader to go ahead and add value back. Only then we close the loop. So sales process needs to be a bi-directional value add. The only reason that I have put XQ or execution quotient is the need for you to understand that your customer engagement is the differentiator. In fact, for those of you who will read the Challenger sale, you will find that more than 50% of a customer's decision is based on the seller experience, how they engage with you. Your brand, product, service, etc. is only less than 40%. It's the seller experience that differentiates you. So we have finished 3 Qs, and we are having a conversation with an executive. And remember, when you are with your executive, you need to go ahead and think about what differentiates you. Very clearly. One second, did I switch a slide? No. Okay, you need to think about what differentiates you. If you have the opportunity, you could actually go ahead and capture this diagram on your books. Let me explain what this is. From the customer perspective, what they see in common between you and your competition is called value parity, which is what customers say, oh, all of you are looking the same. Well, Oracle is saying the same thing, you guys are saying the same thing, SAP is saying the same thing, correct? It's called value parity. In fact, from my experience, what I have discovered is that as salespeople, we tend to focus on how we are different whereas our customers tend to focus on how we are all the same. Right? Now, from the customer's perspective, what they see as different between you and the competition is called the value wedge. Remember, listen to my words carefully. It is not about we saying we are different. It is the customer acknowledging how you are different. That's called the value wedge. Now, you can't go ahead and say, wow, I got an amazing value wedge equation from the customer. The only way I will know that you have a value wedge is when the customer pays you more for how you are different. You can't come back and say, whoa, we have a wonderful value wedge. Give me 90% discount. Right? That doesn't work. You need to ensure that if indeed you have a value wedge, you're able to monetize that value wedge. That's what I call rubber hitting the road. The next element that you need to think of is the numerical quotient. Now, when we speak to executives, they operate at 50,000 feet. Oh, we want to improve the business, increase optimization, increase efficiency. Is that actionable? It's not. What we need to do is to peel the onion, to go ahead and ensure that we are able to get to goals and milestones for the customer. And it is just not about goals and milestones. It is about the common language of money, KPI, and measurement. Remember, your customer is paying you money. You can't go ahead and say, oh, I'll give you beautiful software. Doesn't work. You will have to go ahead and talk about how your beautiful software actually transforms their company. In fact, write it down if it's useful. How does my capability show up on my customer's P&L? How does my capability show up on my customer's P&L? That's what we need to be thinking about. Now, when we talk about common language of money, KPI, and measurement, who should be doing the math? Should we be doing it, or should the customer be doing it? It should be the customer. Oftentimes, we have value engineering. I'm not saying anything is wrong with that, but what I'm saying is the more we do the calculation, the less the customer is convinced. The more we push on the customer, the more they push back on us. So what we need to do is to learn the art of what I call back-of-the-envelope economics. The ability to talk the language of money, KPI, and measurement in 15 to 20 minutes. You don't need a PhD in statistics to go ahead and do this. You should be able to talk about how your project will show up on their customer's P&L. And the final element, remember I told you that one of the hats that I wear is of an executive coach. Please use that particular format. When you speak to your customers, they tend to speak very high level. Ask them to land it in this format. Achieve what by how. From X to Y by when. Remember, X to Y is either a dollar number, is either a number, or a percentage. It should be measurable, and when is a date. So whether you're talking about fiscal strategies, whether you're talking about their steps to their mission or vision, or how they want to reduce costs, please use this format. The next quotient is what I call partnership quotient. And if it is useful, you could go ahead and note this down. Write down your name and write plus plus after that. If you can achieve 100%, the first plus is your virtual team. Can you, with your virtual team, achieve 125%? The second plus are your external partnerships. Can you, with your virtual team and your external partnerships, get to 150%? That is what partnerships is all about. In fact, to make it easier, I have designed a set of equations for you. The first equation is 1 plus 1 equal to 3. We call this synergy, right? Two of us come together, we achieve more. The second equation is called 1 plus 1 equal to 11. This is what I call force multiplier. It is like two people coming together, there is nuclear reaction happening, and we get to a different orbit. The third one is 1 plus 1 equal to 0.5. I dig your grave, you dig mine. Right? Is that the quality of partnership? So when we talk about partnership, what I want you to think about is between me and my partner, what's our joint value proposition? In fact, the other way of writing it down is how does our joint value proposition show up on my customer's P&L? How does our joint value proposition show up on my customer's P&L? And for those of you who work with the partner ecosystem, how many of you work with partners here? Wonderful. Please think about how much value do we add at every stage of the partnership. That's what we need to look at. The last element that I want to cover is called diversity quotient. Now think about it. If you have a customer, they would normally have a vision for the organization. That vision, because we are in 2014, can be Vision 2020. Now, if they were to achieve their 2020 goals in 2017, they need to innovate. Am I right? If they have to innovate, the best way to innovate is through the generation of new ideas. And new ideas comes with the diversity that we have in this team. So how do we leverage our diversity to go ahead and increase the customer success? If you look at 500 people here, given our background and experience, there's so much of diversity. If I'm your leader, how do I go ahead and engage with all of you to bring out the goodness of your diversity so that it brings out the new ideas, helps you to innovate? That's what we need to think about. So I just want to go ahead and bring all of this together. The reason that I shared these 7 Qs of sales mastery is also to let you know what is the standard with which we need to engage with customers. I use the 7 Qs in multiple ways. First is when we hire world-class salespeople. So it is just not about the EQ and the IQ. When you hire salespeople, find out how they go ahead and showcase behavior that aligns to all of the other Qs. The second way of using it is also in performance management and feedback. So rather than saying, oh, I think you need to improve your impact and influence skills, doesn't mean anything. You could be specific to say what exactly are the specific skills that you want to go ahead and improve. I hope this was useful to all of you as a backgrounder, because what we have done is to synthesize all of this and simplify all of this into a deal qualification framework. And when I say simplification, we primarily thought about what could be more simple than perhaps the colors of the rainbow. Right? All of you remember the colors of the rainbow? Violet, indigo, blue, green, yellow, orange, and red. In some geographies, they teach you the other way. Right? But then what we have said is that whether it is relationships, obstacles, why, INFOR, we have brought together 7 different criteria to go ahead and develop a checklist of those criteria. I should say that I was privileged yesterday to go ahead and shoot a number of videos. There are 10 videos that we shot yesterday on each one of these different elements about how you could qualify your deals better. In fact, one of the elements of deal qualification was this entire checklist. It has a number of these questions, and these questions will now be part of SFDC. They would go ahead and be questions that you would use to go ahead and progress through the sales stages. And I want to call out 2 things as you look at this spreadsheet. The first element that you see is a yes or a no for the question, which is your assessment. Next to it is whether it is anticipated by me, which means assumed by me or confirmed by the customer's decision maker. In fact, we have done a number of these deal qualification workshops across Asia. And for most people who came in with their qualified opportunities, they were surprised to find the number of elements that they did not know. I used to go ahead and tell them the way to score this is to say, if you answer yes to the question, and if it is C, which is confirmed by the customer, only then the score is 1. In all other cases, the score is 0. Now, if you answer it honestly, and if you're conservative about how you answer these, you will discover a number of elements that are 0. Remember, 0 is not failure. 0 is just telling us that we have more work to do. And oftentimes, the 0 happens primarily because there is no customer validation. All of you must have heard that hope is not a strategy. And as salespeople, we suffer from this disease called irrational optimism. Right? I don't know why it will happen, but it will happen. It's called irrational optimism. So we need to go ahead and ensure that we are able to tame this irrational optimism through the science of deal qualification. Please make sure that if you have any deal greater than 50K, 100K, you choose what the number is. But if you go through this diligently, you will find you make this a habit. If you go ahead and paste this in front of you on your cubicle, you will find this becomes your invisible manager. Don't allow your manager to ask you these questions. This would be powerful. Please ensure that you use it. And while I say this, I want to wrap it up by also telling you about how to sustain your learning. What I have done in these last 50 minutes is to move you from unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence. That's all that I've done. Remember, the journey from conscious incompetence to conscious competence comes out of your willingness to act. Learning without action is hallucination. Right? So please go ahead and absorb all of this, put it into action. And remember, as adults, we need to take action at least 20 times for it to become a habit. A lot of us take action but don't sustain it. Only when we sustain the action and make it a habit do we get into unconscious competence. My encouragement to all of you is to go ahead and have the mindset, learn the skill set, use the tool set to go ahead and ensure that we're able to put all of this into action. As a parting gift, what I wanted to do is to kernelize all of the learnings that I've had in over 2 decades of selling into specific elements that you could take away. I call these the Tripura sales tenets. If you feel comfortable, you could take a photograph of that. It will help you to go ahead and understand how to become a world-class salesperson. In fact, a couple of my favorites here is time kills deals. Time kills deals. If you have something slipping and slipping, you know what exactly I mean. There are others that you can look at, building a sense of urgency. A lot of us think that we have been in the system for a long time. Man, we got to build that sense of urgency and the bias for action. For you to go ahead and make a difference, please be uncomfortable about the fact that we have only 168 hours in a week. We work for 40, 45 hours. We need to build that bias for action. And of course, if you're a manager, we go ahead and talk about consciously making others great. If you were part of my team, I am your manager till you take the quota from me. Once you have accepted your quota, I exist to serve you. That's the kind of servant leadership that we need to build in our leaders. It is not about my ego as a leader, but my mindset to serve my people to be successful. I hope that these 45 minutes have been useful for you. We normally cover a lot of this ground in one day, in a full-day workshop. I have tried to kernelize everything. I hope this 1 hour has been a good spend of my time. My very best wishes for your success. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please.